Welcome back to Banging the Can, the Houston sports show that does not apologize for championship rings and tings, presented by Bolen Media. I am Ross Bolen, and we made it. We made it to football season. We did it, everyone. Congratulations.
Please clap.
Look at us. First game of the Houston Texans season was on Sunday in Indianapolis against the Colts. 29-27 win for the boys. Good game. More stressful than it needed to be, for sure, but a good game all around. Let's talk about some of the things that happened. Let's start with CJ Stroud, the most important person, perhaps, in the history of our franchise. Stroud had, by and large, I guess, unremarkable game by his standards. One of the things that occurred to me over the course of this one was that the Colts defense is pretty solid. Pretty solid. The Colts are a good team. It would not surprise me at all if they made the playoffs as a wild card team based on what we saw on Sunday. Now, very early in the season to be saying that. Obviously, there's a lot of football left to be played, but their defense is not bad. And so CJ was kept on a leash again, in terms of what he's capable of. But yeah, 24 for 32, 234 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, 7.3 yards average per pass. He didn't have to do too much. Just protect the ball, make the right reads, don't panic, don't have too many sacks, hand the ball off to Mixon, and you'll be fine. And that's what he did. And we were fine. So CJ did what he needed to do. It wasn't really, there was he did have a couple of throws where it was like you saw that CJ Stroud magic where you're throwing back across his body, finding Nico Collins wide open in the middle of the field on a scramble. He had a couple of throws like that where you're just like anybody else in the league throwing that pass. You're like, oh God, no, stop, please. But somehow he pulls it off. No turnovers, like I said. So, I just think after last season, we all expect like nonstop fireworks from CJ Stroud, and that's not really what we need from him. We have a very potent offense with a lot of weapons. We just need him to play it cool, take care of the ball, get those dudes the ball, and we'll be fine, especially against teams that we are supposed to beat. And I would put the Colts in that category, even though I do, after this game, and really from what we saw last season, think they are trending in the right direction as a franchise and really have nothing against them in terms of like, a divisional rival. I don't hate Colts fans, and I have no reason to hate this current Colts team. Nico Collins, man. He made a couple of catches where I was like, welcome back, Andre Johnson. Like, 2 guys draped on him, still finds a way to pull the ball down. He's just so strong. Obviously had a great game, 117 yards receiving on 6 catches, no touchdowns. But yeah, I was kind of curious what the pecking order would look like in terms of our wide receivers. We obviously added, Tank Dell's back healthy. We added Stephon Diggs. I was curious to see what was going to happen. Nico Collins was our clear-cut wide receiver 1 last season. Based on week 1 of this season, I don't think that's going to change. I still think he's going to be the number 1 option. He's the biggest target with arguably the most effective hands. He's a great route runner. But in traffic, he makes crazy shit happen. Nico had a great game, just didn't happen to be one where we needed him to score. Tank Dell also looked good. I think he's going to be kind of the number 3 option behind Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs. Tank is also a dude that, if I remember correctly, last season, it took him a couple of games to like really get going and for him and CJ to really get on the same page and start making some magic. So, I mean, it's 3 guys right there between Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, and Tank Dell that are all very dangerous in the open field. Very good route runners, can make a lot of shit happen with the ball in their hands, and we know what CJ can do. So like I said, as far as the offense goes, and we'll talk about Joe Mixon here in a second. As far as the offense goes, it's just about protecting the ball because we're going to score points. We're going to score points. And it's about making sure you spread the ball around so everybody stays happy, obviously, which is going to be on our offensive coordinator, Bobby. Bobby's got to make the right calls, make sure everybody's getting enough of the ball in their direction to stay happy, and we should be fine. Joe Mixon, MVP of this game, without argument. Nico had a great game, but the ground game is where we had all of this, like, a total lack of momentum last season. You know, we had a couple of good games where we were up against a terrible run defense, so we made some things happen, but like we 30 rushes for 159 yards. Like, again, it's only one game, so this might be a little early to say this, but it's the first time we've had a back this effective that can carry that kind of workload since Arian Foster. Like, he's making the jump cuts. He had several plays where he looked a lot like Arian, minus like the high stepping. And Joe Mixon was super impressive. I didn't really know what to make of the move to go and get Joe Mixon. Obviously, you know, coming out of college, he was a pretty highly thought of running back. And then he had a few weeks here and there with the Bengals where he did something special, but it was like, for the most part, I didn't have a read on this guy. And after this week, I'm very, 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 very impressed with Joe Mixon's game. So that really couldn't have gone better, frankly, for game one for Joe Mixon. Our running back situation is great. It really is. And I just, like, it's been forever since I felt that way. Nick Caserio deserves a lot of credit for putting this team together, obviously, but for improving this team in the offseason the way that he did and really going for it and pushing the chips into the middle of the table and saying, fuck it, let's make a Super Bowl run. Joe Mixon could end up making him look like a genius when it's all said and done. Nick Caserio, yeah, that was a fantastic start. It's hard to be better than that every week. Stephon Diggs, couple of touchdown catches, little slant routes in the red zone. Looks like that's going to be kind of easy pickings for him as a result of Nico Collins and Tank Dell also being dangerous in the red zone. So it's yeah. The offense for week one was kind of humming in a way that you like to see. They've already figured out a little few things here and there that are going to work really, really well and be very effective. Stephon Diggs in the red zone running slant routes, easy money, and keeping him happy with a couple of tutties in game one. Very, very wise. There's all this concern around Diggs and whether or not he'll be a distraction and a diva and yada, yada. So far, so good, and he's saying the right things to the press, and he's making people in Buffalo and Minnesota look silly as hell. But again, just one game. Just one game. Can't get too far ahead of ourselves, but so far, so good from Stephon Diggs. The offensive line. Slow start at the beginning of the game. Looked like it was going to be a bigger problem than it ended up being at the beginning of the game. You can always count on Laramie Tunsil to get a couple of false starts. I don't know why he struggles with this so much. He's obviously he's a great pass protector. He's a great offensive lineman, but he just can't get the timing down. And it's like the story of his career at this point. Like, he's good for a couple of false starts a game at a minimum. He had his couple of false starts in this one. At the beginning of the game, the offensive line looked a little shoddy, and I was pretty fucking concerned about protecting C.J. Stroud because that's probably the most important thing this football team absolutely has to do all season long. We cannot have C.J. Stroud get hurt. If he gets hurt, this whole thing comes fucking collapsing down like a house of cards, and we're all screwed and back to square one. And I don't want to go back to square one. We've been back to square one enough times. I want to go to square two and then square three. I don't know how many squares there are because I've never thought that far ahead, but I do know this. They've got to protect C.J. Stroud, or none of this other shit we talk about will matter. So the offensive line started pretty slow and looked like they were going to get their fucking asses kicked all day, and then they finally picked it up and they finally got some momentum, and by the second half they're creating these huge holes for Joe Mixon. CJ was getting enough time. He's very, very smart, CJ. He's very good at reading pressure. You don't have to give him that much time. You just have to give him enough. Just enough. And they were giving him enough. But yeah, the offensive line is, I would say, the second biggest area of concern for the Houston Texans through 1 week. They've got to protect C.J. Stroud. They've got to be better than they were in the first quarter. They got better over the course of the game. The number one area of concern, what do you think it is? I'll give you a second. What do you think it is? What do you think it is? Write it in the comments right now. What do you think it is? The number one area of concern. It's the defensive backfield. What the hell was that? This game, Anthony Richardson dick punched our DBs. Was it 3 different deep balls? If not for the deep ball, we win this game handily, easily, stress-free. I don't know what the hell was going on back there. Stingley got burned a couple of times. Richardson has a cannon. This dude's throwing it 65 yards in the air, but what the fuck were the defensive backs and the safeties doing? It's unacceptable to get beat like that once, twice, thrice. That's too much. That's too much. That's getting beat too many times. That's too much. Can't have that happen. Credit to Anthony Richardson. He's got a hell of a deep ball. There's some other areas of his game that are still lacking. He's only started like 18 football games in his entire career as a quarterback, which is so crazy to think about. But the dude's good on his feet. Great deep ball. He has issues with accuracy here and there, but not beyond 50 fucking yards, apparently. He's great there. So, like, our defensive backs got destroyed on long balls, and that was the reason the Colts stayed in the game. If not for that, obviously, this thing it's a beating. But we almost gave this one away with a handful of bad plays on both sides of the ball. A few on defense, a few on offense, where I'm scratching my head like, what are we doing here? This is embarrassing. We're going to blow this. And that's obviously the difference between a Super Bowl contender and just a team that makes the playoffs and then gets wiped by somebody who actually matters, is those few plays a game that are huge difference makers. And that's where we want to see the Texans improve as the season goes on, right? You cannot have those kind of mistakes if you want to be taken seriously as a Super Bowl contending NFL franchise. And those deep balls getting burned like that single-handedly kept the Indianapolis Colts in this game. When they're in the coaches' meetings this week on the whiteboard, probably today or tomorrow, surely that shit is at the top. Like, what were we doing? What was this? Corners, safeties. Explain yourselves. They got to improve there. Cannot be giving up that type of shit. Fairbairn, still kicking the crap out of the ball. Great game. Speaking of which, I have to address it. What the fuck was that at halftime? The referees royally screwed up the situation before the end of the first half. We can all acknowledge that. I'm quite certain you would be hard-pressed to find someone who argues otherwise. They screwed that up. Indianapolis calls timeout. They go over to talk to the coach during the timeout. Turns out the coach was right, so they convinced the referees to make the change. They come back and they announce that Indianapolis was right. 15 seconds are on the clock. They're about to start the play. Oh, wait, never mind. Our bad. It's supposed to be 5 seconds. They take it down to 5 seconds. They totally fail to mention that they're giving Indianapolis back their timeout. As such, our sideline is operating under the impression that the ball is dead, that when the ball is placed, the clock is dead, that the clock is not going to start running when the referees place the football. Our side is wrong. They place the football, clock starts running, CJ sees it, starts clapping. The whole situation blows up in our faces. We walk into halftime 3 points shy of where we should have been. That was a disaster. And I mean, D'Amico is not going to throw the referees or the NFL under the bus during his little halftime interview on his way off the field, so he didn't. But if there was ever a time to do so, this was probably it. He did rightfully acknowledge that's on us, because at the end of the day, it is on you as a head coach. That was an unacceptable error. If you want to win a Super Bowl, if you want to be an elite NFL team, you cannot make mistakes like that. You cannot leave 3 points on the board that cause me to not get paid because we don't cover. The line is 3. We won by 2, but we should have absolutely had 3 more points. I've also got Fairbairn on my fantasy team. What the fuck? Come on. Bad mistake. Bad error. In all seriousness, absolutely cannot happen. My own personal biases aside, as a result of money in fantasy football, cannot happen. It cannot happen. You cannot leave 3 points on the field. The NFL is an any given Sunday league. You never know what's going to happen. You think you're dominating, and all of a sudden Anthony Richardson can't stop throwing 60-yard bombs that your DBs fail to get back on. So you got to take every point you're given. And in that case, that was 3 easy points we should have had at the very least. I don't even understand really why with 5 seconds on the clock, we weren't just taking the field goal right there, and we were, for whatever reason, lined up to let CJ run another play with the offense. I don't really get it. This is the only mistake you could probably say DeMeco Ryans made in that game, and it cannot happen again. He knows it can't happen again. He knows it was a huge mistake. I'm sure that will be a focal point moving forward. Like, we've got to be more on our P's and Q's when halftime is coming up and the clock is running out. Now, to be fair, like I said, the referees botched that shit about as badly as they could have. That was embarrassing, to the point that someone should probably lose their job. Like, that was fucked. Like, if that decided this game, it would be a much bigger deal. It ended up not mattering as much as it could have, unless you had Texans -3, in which case it was an absolute beating. But we can all just move forward and learn from the error. But I don't know what the hell that would. It took the broadcast a full quarter of football to even figure out what actually occurred. They're talking about it during the halftime show. Nobody knows what the fuck. Nobody's even bringing up the timeout. They get into the third quarter. They're still talking about it, but they're still not explaining it correctly. Everybody on X, is still trying to figure it out. Then, into the third quarter or beginning of the fourth, I can't even remember, they finally readdressed it again. We ended up talking about the fucking halftime debacle for literally 40 minutes on the broadcast. What was that? Broadcast team, not great. If I had to grade them, C-, maybe D+. Didn't love them at all. We're here. We're talking about the game. I might as well just, judge everyone else except myself. All in all, good start to the season. 1-0, right? Every week you want to go 1-0. You take it one game at a time. A win is a win. As shoddy as some of the play was, especially in the defensive backfield, and as weird as some of the moments were where you felt like surely we're going to put our foot on their, neck soon, it kept not happening, and they kept finding a way to stay in the game, the Colts, and we still won, still walk away with a win, move on to next week. But, God, that was so much more stressful than it needed to be. It just didn't need to be that stressful. It didn't need to be all that, and it was that, and I was fucking sweating watching it on my couch. I like to be able to be seated at the end of the game and just relax and enjoy a nice W. I'm standing up with my hands in my pockets, sweating profusely, going, "Holy shit! Now we're not going to cover." And that's what happened. We didn't cover. But it's not about me. It's about the team, and the team won. So we got Chicago next. The Bears. That's another game you got to win. There are going to be a lot of challenging football games down the road in this season, but the first 4 games, I want wins from all of them. Chicago Bears in Houston for week 2. Minnesota Vikings in Minnesota for week 3. Jacksonville Jaguars in Houston for week 4. Based on week 1, those are all winnable games. Then you go to we got Buffalo at home. That'll be a really good game. New England, they stink. Green Bay, Jordan Love injury, Then we're playing the Colts again, the Jets, Detroit. Everybody was looking at our schedule preseason, talking about how difficult it was. I think based on week 1, we overestimated the schedule. I don't think it's as difficult as everybody thought. And I think there's a very good chance we could go 4-0 into that week 5 game against the Buffalo Bills, which would be a big one. And that would be a great start to the season. That would be the more momentum this team can get up front early on in the schedule, the better off we're going to be towards the end. I know that sounds like an obvious fucking statement, but what I'm saying is this team is really good. We know the Texans are good. We saw what they've got last year. We wanted them to build off of that, and hopefully they will. This didn't feel like a huge step forward week 1, but it wasn't a step backwards, and that's a good thing. We still got to win. CJ is still healthy. We have more weapons on offense than we've maybe ever had as a team ever. Not maybe, we do. This is the most potent offense the Houston Texans have ever had in the history of the franchise. What are we, 23 years in or something like that at this point? I don't even remember. A lot of years. When were the Houston Texans founded? I always forget. 2002. So yeah, over a 20-year period here, this is the most potent offense we've ever had. It is probably the best shot we will ever have at actually making an AFC championship game. There are several factors that remain the most important in that being a real possibility. One is CJ Stroud's health, which I've said and will continue to say all season long. That man must stay healthy. They must protect him. But in terms of offense, we have everything we could possibly need. I would like to see D'Amico and the defense continue to take steps. Like I said, the defensive backs, not that good. Not that impressive. Pass rush, not that good. Not that impressive. Was Will Anderson even out there? I don't think I heard his name said. I think right now is the first time I've actually even thought about him this season, including yesterday's game, which is weird. I don't know. I don't know if he was he even playing? I'm scrolling. Bear with me. I had a couple tackles. Pass rush was not good, is my point. Anthony Richardson was also very good at scrambling, but all that is to say, week 1, got the dub. Wonderful, lovely. Let's move on to week 2 and get another one. And you want to see improvement every week. This is the NFL. This is not, we've been talking about Astros for months and months. Longest season in the world. This is not that. You got to be able to kind of switch hats when you're watching the Texans versus the Astros and the way you judge these teams, because we need to see improvement and momentum built every week by the Texans. The Astros can have an off series here and there. We haven't beat the Reds since like 2016. Nobody knows what the fuck that's about. Verlander is getting absolutely shelled like he's playing batting practice with these boys. He's got to get his shit together before the playoffs, but there's so much time to figure shit out in baseball. That is not how it works in the NFL. You have got to be on your A game week in, week out. You got to take steps forward every single fucking week, and we need to see that next week when we play the Bears, because that'll be our home opener. I think it's going to be quite loud at NRG. Very exciting stuff. Wonder if I can go to that game. Maybe I'll try to go to that game, but we're in a good spot here. We're in a good spot. Texans football is back. A lot to be happy about. Let me see if I missed anything else in the way of stats I wanted to discuss. I don't think so. I really don't think so. 26 first downs to the Colts 14. That's a beating. Very efficient on third down, 50%. Colts were also 50% converting on third down. Two fourth down conversions. 417 total yards to their 303. Doubled the amount of rushing yards that they had with 213. 213 rushing yards, man. If you can get 200 rushing yards a game out of Mixon in the squad and have CJ Stroud airing the ball out as a result with a balanced attack, it is going to be very fucking difficult to stop that offense. And then it's going to be a matter of who can score the most points. And if D'Amico, who's supposed to be a defensive-minded coach, can get this defense cooking, baby, we got a stew going. So we'll see how it goes. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves or continue to talk myself in circles, so I will say farewell. But 1-0, let's fucking go. Be here every week. I'll be talking about every game. This one was a little bit odd in terms of there's not a whole lot, like week 1, there's not a whole lot of storylines to address. We got the win. We moved the fuck on. Joe Mixon, MVP. Should almost go without saying. And that will do it for today's show. Remember, every episode of Banging the Can is available on all the major podcast platforms as well as on YouTube. If you are watching on YouTube right now, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment. Thank you. Means a lot. On that note, please share the most unapologetic Houston sports show in existence with your friends and family. Follow us on social media at Banging the Can. Support our sponsors when we have them. Today, I'm your sponsor. We didn't have one. That means I'm doing this for free. It means I'm working for free. It means that this is a little sad, is what it means. So when we do have sponsors, support them. Check out Bolen Media and our other shows. You can go to bolenmedia.com or just listen to me talk for the next 10 seconds. We have an F1 show called Formula Bone, hosted by Jared J-Bone Borislow, where every week he gives you the best American-made F1 coverage in the world. At Formula Bone on all the social media platforms, youtube.com/@FormulaBone, also available on the audio platforms if you are a podcast listener. Check out the Ross Bolen podcast, which is where I talk about just stuff that's funny to me and mental health and crazy happenings in the world and such. And then, of course, there's Oysters, Clams, and Cockles if you are a big fan of TV and movies. That one's also hosted by me and another Houston born and raised friend of mine, Barrett Dudley. Oysters, Clams, and Cockles available wherever you get Banging the Can. I am Ross Bolen. Follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram at WRBOLEN. My first name is William Ross Bolen at WRBolen. I'll be back next week. Hopefully the Astros can continue to maintain their 4.5-game division lead in the meantime, and we can focus on the Texans. Until then, H-Town, stay down.